Director of Human Resources, Tracy Flynn Bowe, Executive Director of Community Education, Adam Holm, and Director of Community Engagement and Communications, Tammy DeLand.
Thank you, Bruce. First up on tonight's agenda is the consent agenda. The consent agenda consists of non-controversial items that the board routinely adopts without debate. Any single member of the board may remove an item from the consent agenda by requesting removal at the time the consent agenda is moved for adoption. The full text of items can be found at the end of the agenda. On tonight's consent agenda, we have A, approval of tonight's agenda, B, approval of the minutes from the meetings of September 19th and October 3rd, C, approval of payment of bills and other financial transactions in the grand total amount of $16,482,858.59. D, approval of personnel and staff changes. E, acceptance of grant awards and donations. And F, quarterly expenditures for board members. I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
And a second? We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on tonight's consent agenda? Seeing none, Mr. Moses, would you call roll?
Bruce Moses, yes. Shannon Hawes?
Yes.
Jerry Von Korf?
Yes.
Jeff Paul Rice?
Yes.
Al Dahlgren?
Yes.
Bruce Henches?
Yes.
Monica Seguda Schwartz?
Yes.
Thank you. We'll move into information items. The first item in the information items is a strategic plan update, and that will be presented by Lori Posh, Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, and Dr. Sylvia Huff, Director of Research, Evaluation, and Achievement. Welcome.
Thank you. And let me get this on real quick. Thank you, Board Chair Dahlgren, Superintendent Jett, board members, and executive directors. This is always an exciting time for us when we get to share the accomplishments that have happened the past year with our strategic plan. Last year in April, we presented to the core planning team all of the celebrations and accomplishments of the strategic plan for the 2017-18 school year. During that core planning team, members of the team listened intently, asked very in-depth questions about what we had to present, and then reviewed our recommendations for the progress that had been made. After that core planning team, they made recommendations to the superintendent's cabinet and also to the superintendent, of course, and that's what we have to present to you tonight, our summary. This is informational in background. It's a summary again of what was accomplished last school year and then what our main goals are for this year. So as we get started, as you know, our mission, which we say at every meeting and is central to all of our agendas in the district and our meetings that we have, our mission statement came out of that strategic plan. And our mission really is the center of focus for our district. It's not just words on paper. It really is crucial to everything that we do and everything that we implement within the district. This mission statement and the whole core planning process, what really struck me this year in April when we were with the core planning team were the comments of the students at the end of that day. The comments about feeling so supportive and really feeling like they understood what the heart of our mission was for our district. Brief reminder that we have 3 strategies that we focus on in our strategic plan, and then also the measurements. So tonight we're going to do a quick overview of the accomplishments again of the 2017-18 school year. So a few people will be joining us. We do have point people who kind of coordinate the work around each of the results or the strategies. So I'm the point person for strategy 1. Tammy DeLand is for strategy 2. Tracy Bowe for strategy 3, and Dr. Huff for the measurement. You have quite a few attachments that were on the agenda tonight. So you will find on that agenda attachment the summaries of progress. These are the details of the accomplishments that were done in each of the areas. And we're not going to read this to you tonight or go through everything that's in here, but I'd ask you to take a look at all of these accomplishments. You also have a copy of this year's strategic plan. And again, the front of it looks similar to what you've seen in other years. At the end of the presentation, we're going to go through what our priority results are for our current year. So let's get started. Strategy 1 is that we will train and support staff members to ensure instruction to achieve our mission and strategic objectives. For each of our summaries, you're going to see some pictures because we think that pictures really do the best job of telling the story of some of the things that happened. Strategy 1, the 3 areas for priority results, you can see them on the arrow, 2, 3, and 4. You can read them on this document. Really focused around having a framework in place for all of our professional development, making sure that we have dedicated time and resources for professional development, and ensuring that our onboarding practices are really what they should be. So I'm going to talk real briefly about that framework and dedicated time and resources on this slide, and then we'll talk about our onboarding. We spend a lot of time gathering feedback from both our licensed staff and our non-licensed staff about what their needs are for professional development. So in the upper left-hand corner, you see a lot of words. And what we did is take all of that feedback that was gathered from all of our employees who did our survey. The words that come up larger are the words that came up most often in those evaluations. So you can see on here, computer training, looking really closely at programs, classroom, and I'm always thrilled that students always comes up large because all of our staff really believe that our focus is on our students. When we talk about dedicated time, for our licensed staff, we know that we have dedicated time on our calendar for professional development. But not only that, this last year and the year before, we went even deeper to make sure that we had professional development language embedded in the teacher contract so that time was dedicated right in the sites, the school buildings, every month for some professional development. We also offered before and after school options based on that feedback that we received. You can see down in the lower left-hand corner a bunch of cards. And what we did with several groups this year was ask them, what are all of the needs for professional development? And then we asked them to categorize those needs. So that's a picture of one group's categorization. And the things that came up with our district staff development team, our administrators, our learning and teaching team, really fell into 4 main areas: social emotional, instructional strategies, diversity including EL, and technology. So we know that those are 4 key areas that we'll focus on this coming year. For our non-licensed staff, we made sure that we had August professional development. That's something that's just happened in the last couple of years as a direct result from this strategy. It was just gone from my mind. But we knew that we couldn't just focus on professional development of our licensed staff. We also needed to do that for our non-licensed staff. Throughout the year, there were monthly special ed, para, professional development opportunities. Some of our supervisors went to supervisory training and also management training. So really ensuring that we're building the skills of all of our staff. For our licensed staff, we focused a lot on the relicensure requirements for the licensed staff to make sure that not only did they have the information that they needed to be successful in our schools, but to meet their relicensure. When we talk about dedicated resources, we know that those paid days in August for training, the days in the buildings, we had some carryover that we were able to put back into the buildings for them to use specifically for the needs in their buildings. And then we've talked before about our academic coach positions and how that really is job-embedded professional development. When we talk about onboarding, I really believe that we have one of the best onboarding systems. I know of our area school districts, but I think also of the state. When we talk about our onboarding with other districts, they're amazed at what we offer. For our licensed staff, we have a 3-year mentorship program. We offer stipends for both the mentors and the mentees. And one thing that's really unique for us is that we offer a lane change for those teachers who have completed the 3 years of mentorship and have earned tenure in our district. We know that retaining the staff and training them well is really one of the keys to our success. For non-licensed, there are orientations that are offered 2 times a week. As of March last year, HR reports that they had onboarded 305 new employees last year from the beginning of the year through March. And then at those orientations, our special ed paraprofessionals receive some extra training. We also offer training for our guest teachers or our substitutes 2 times a year to make sure that they have information that they need as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Tammy for Strategy 2.
Good evening. So I'm here to summarize the work that we did with Strategy 2 this past year in the district. And if you'll recall, this is the strategy that talks about creating and developing as well as implementing district systems and community partnerships to support students in and out of school in their success to achieve our mission and the strategic objectives outlined within the strategic plan. Really boiled down, Strategy 2 is all about connections and relationships and positive storytelling about the great things that are going on in our district. So it's an awareness, but also a little bit of the brag book. So let's begin, again, just referencing the check marks that you have on the strategic plan that Lori handed out. Let's just begin with priority result number 2, and that is the one that talks about partnerships being defined, protocols and guidelines being defined, talking about what makes up a healthy and relevant partnership. We have done that over a progressive system with internal and external partnership committees. And so now you will find those definitions, you'll find the guidelines, they're all on the website, as well as our database of over 200 community partners that work with our school district. And that is something that's continually updated and then annually completely shifted so that it's a new database. Addressing priority result number 3, that's in regard to sustainable and coordinated district-wide systems that work with partnerships to foster trust with our district. A couple of really good examples that took place in this past year with this priority result would be the United Way neighborhood resource centers at Discovery and Lincoln. High level of trust with our families in those schools with the work that those United Way staff bridged with our elementary schools and our families. Another really good example of this priority result would be the community cafes that the Equity Services Department hosted to get engagement with our families. Regarding priority result number 4, this was the strategy result that said we need to monitor and be able to assess how we're doing with partnerships. So last year was the first year that we put together a survey that would help us determine how we're doing and how the partnership is doing in helping us meet our goals. And that's the first year that we created and implemented that. We started with 11 of kind of our big and continual partners, and the plan is to administer that survey every year. In addition, a future plan, the tool is not created yet, but a future plan is to create a feedback tool that our partners can give us information with their ideas of how it's going and improvements that they might have for us. If you shift now to priority number 6, this talks about our comprehensive communication plan to deliver clear and timely messages, again, to all of our stakeholders, internal and external audiences. Our social media strategy is specifically targeted to engage our parents and staff in immediate, interactive, and relevant communication, as well as our various electronic and physical newsletters. One addition to our toolbox, if you will, this past year is the superintendent's newsletter, which you have in front of you here tonight. That's a new instrument, just implemented actually in August, and that goes out 3 times a year. Our plan is to do that 3 times a year throughout, yes, it's called The Connection. And that's a physical one that we insert in the community ed catalog to get good reach with our community members. And finally, we continue to maintain our internal and external communications with a very positive focus on storytelling. You'll remember the 742 Proud campaign, which was very, very successful. This year, we've launched an I Am 742 campaign to build from that pride and to tell the stories of our district in a very up-close and personal way. And now I think I will turn it over to Tracy Flynn-Bowe.
Okay, and I'm going to report tonight on strategy number 3, and really this strategy is all about welcoming and engaging our communities, both students, staff, families, and community. Starting with result number 1 and 3, which are all about that. It's about making sure that we have all of those groups invested and engaged in positive ways and as often as possible in two-way communication with the school district. So we started that work in terms of students with the elementary goal-setting conferences. This was our second year of those. Those were very successful, and in fact, we started moving those into the middle school this year because families really appreciated that opportunity to start the year highly engaged with their teachers and students. In addition to that, we have all sorts of family nights that go on in our elementary schools, STEM nights, math nights, reading nights, school bingo nights, anything that the schools are working hard at to get families into the schools and really engaged with their staff. At the secondary school, we saw students engaged not only through extracurriculars and clubs and activities that most of us are familiar with, but also with equity teams, the Man Up program at the high schools, the African American Girls program, and other experiences like that. Families, we engaged our families through the One Book, One District event that was held throughout the district. And again, in addition, we have all sorts of events for families, including conference nights, PTA meetings, meetings particularly for some of our special populations, the Somali parent meetings, parent in action programs. And so those are the kinds of things we were doing with engagement with our students and their families. For employees, a huge engagement piece for last year was spending significant time with all of our labor groups in contract negotiations. And while that can sometimes be a long and laborious process, it's also a wonderful opportunity to really engage each of those work groups and understand how they see the district and what they need from us to be fully engaged. We do annual evaluation with all staff, and we've really focused on those evaluation processes being tied to the strategic plan and making sure that each employee sees themselves as important to the execution of that plan. Surveys of employees that not only give feedback to cabinet members and school leaders, but also to the district as a whole. With respect to the community, you already heard about some of those events, the community cafes. In addition to that, we really try to engage our community in the Teaching and Learning Advisory Committee, the School Board Finance Committee. We engage community in a really intense way around the new tech and the repurposing of the old tech, and so looking for those opportunities to make sure that community are part of our planning processes. As we move on to result number 5, that was about the welcome audits. At the end of 16-17, we conducted welcome audits in all of our buildings that engage staff, families, and community members in walking through each of our schools with a script of things that they were looking for and kind of evaluating. That led in this last year to implementation of many changes that were driven by those welcome audits. Those include things like improving our signage in buildings, working on safe and secure entrances, better display of student work throughout the schools so that each school is really representing what's happening in their schools, better use of multilingual resources, improvements of websites, and those kinds of things all came out of that feedback. Result number 6, is about making sure that we have smooth transitions into the district, whether that's for families and students or for employees. And so we worked hard, Tammy and Adam especially, on the Welcome Center protocols, doing research, looking at other districts, seeing what was kind of the best practices for making sure that our Welcome Center was a place that had all of the resources that families needed, and then making the plan for moving that into the new DAO building and getting that program really working for us. In addition to that, we've, as you heard earlier, we onboarded over 300 employees each year, and so we've really been working hard in my department on those recruiting and onboarding processes to make sure as we bring staff on that they're being brought on in a really intentional way, and that we've created a platform of success so that we can retain our employees as well. And then lastly, result number 7 is about the community's access to our facilities. And again, the Executive Director of Community Education worked hard this year, particularly as you're moving into core review and kind of resetting our community ed programs in that new space, to look at what were the obstacles and opportunities for access to our facilities and resources. We offer over 250 classes for youth enrichment programs, over 1,600 participants in those, the adult enrichment programs, the community education programs, serving thousands across the district over the course of the year. So those are what we've been doing on strategy number 3 for engagement and inclusion.
Okay, and so I will now speak on the measurement results. And on the screen is reflected 4 and 5, and we decided to group those together because measurement result number 4 focused on a plan for assessing life skills pre-K through 12 in a reliable and consistent manner and like the development of it, whereas measurement result number 5 was saying that that plan is being implemented, monitored, and maintained. And so together you can't really implement and monitor unless something's been developed, which is why they're grouped together. And you can notice that we've pulled out 2 key factors, the first being social emotional learning and the second being student readiness for success for today and tomorrow. And so work around SEL, primarily this past year, took place in the form of a SEL committee that was working in conjunction with the Minnesota Department of Education to develop a plan for SEL work and rolling that out within our district. Something else that took place was that the behavior reports that are developed within TIES, which is our data warehouse system that's used in the district, had a number of trainings that were provided throughout the year for individuals who had a number of different roles within the district. And so these types of trainings were conducted with our building leads, so principals, assistant principals, admin interns, as well as the different individuals who monitor PBIS on site. And related to that, there were also specific dashboard trainings and understanding how to interpret the data, use the data for the support, the PBIS related work. And so a lot of this was coordinated by the SEL coordinator, who really focused this past year on streamlining that PBIS and SEL efforts within the district. As I mentioned, the second primary aspect of these 2 particular measurement results were focusing on student readiness. And so in particular, last school year, in addition to offering the ACT on a school day, we also offered the AccuPlacer during a school day. And so the ACT and AccuPlacer were offered to all juniors as well as to any seniors who had not taken the ACT during their junior year. And for students who qualify for free or reduced price lunch, their test administration was covered, so it was reimbursed by the district. They didn't have to worry about paying for it. The AccuPlacer is a test that our technical college and other schools use, so for students who might not necessarily be attempting or wanting to go to a 4-year college immediately after school, this could be another pathway and alternative for them. And so by not only providing the ACT but also the AccuPlacer during a school day, we're making sure that we're providing all options for all of our learners. Additionally, last school year, we really started to dig into the SLEDS data, which stands for Statewide Longitudinal Educational Data Systems. And this is a data set that is being compiled by the state that tracks children from pre-K through their post-secondary career into the workforce. And so this data, as you can imagine, operates a couple years behind because there's a lot of work that goes into matching students' numbers from when they're K-12 or pre-K-12 to the numbers that they have attached to them in college, and then also figuring out where they're going throughout the state. So it's not up to 2018 or even 2017 yet. However, it is starting to give us an idea of where our students are going once they finish college, or if they choose to go directly into the workforce, what that looks like. So we are working in partnership with Partners for Student Success because this is an initiative that particular organization is also very interested in terms of saying what resources could best be allocated to our students all throughout the community in terms of helping to support their interests for workforce. The other measurement result that was a focus for this past school year was number 2, which stated a plan for assessing academic skills pre-K through 12 in a reliable and consistent manner has been updated. And in order to really focus in on this particular strategy, one of the first things that we did at the beginning of last school year was revise the district assessment calendar to maximize instruction. So the district assessment team spent a great deal of time the previous year figuring out what appropriate test dates would look like, how long the different testing windows should be in order to make sure that most of the time students are spending learning and not testing. Additionally, we developed a few more assessment calendars in terms of look and feel. So if you go on the public-facing side of the website, and then it's also provided on the StaffNet or staff-facing side as well, there are about 3 different versions of the assessment calendar depending on the level of detail that you need for a given moment. If a teacher or parent is just curious, broken out by fall, winter, spring, what tests are given at what grade level, there's an at-a-glance calendar where they can just very quickly say, okay, well, these tests are given in kindergarten, fall, winter, spring. If they want to know exactly what each test measures, the particular grade level, when the scores are reported out, where they would go to get the scores, there's a detailed assessment calendar that they can go to get that more detailed information. And so really just trying to meet people where they are and having very different formats in terms of that in order to meet their needs. Another way that we focused on developing this plan for assessing academic skills was by making sure that our STAR assessments and the resulting data that comes from that is being consistently used across the district. So the STAR assessment is the test that we use locally 3 times a year to benchmark students in fall, winter, spring, and it also allows us to look at growth from fall to spring for all of our students. These tests are administered K through 10. And one thing that we noticed is that since the STAR suite of products provides a plethora of reports, different schools were using different reports and prioritizing different ones. And so we wanted to make sure that all teachers had a thorough training in terms of what reports were available, and then also making sure that it was very clear what needs the different reports served. And so at the beginning of last school year, the developers of the test, so Renaissance Learning representatives, came out to the district and conducted a full day-long training with all of the academic coaches, as well as representatives from various departments. So there were representatives from the special education department, from learning and teaching, of course, and others that took part in that training so that they could then go back to their buildings and have that knowledge. I also conducted trainings at the middle level, in particular with the middle level staff and faculty, going through how they could use the test results at their grade level, because a lot of the STAR reports have skills that are clearly applicable for the elementary grade levels, but they're also useful for middle school and high school, but it's just not as clearly outlined. And so having those trainings so that they can understand how to best use that material. And then finally, there are reports that link STAR results to MCA performance. And so a lot of training last year was being conducted in terms of how to use those reports to get a sense of where our students are throughout the year and how that can then predict performance on the MCA at the end of the school year. And then finally, the last bullet point on the screen is just mentioning that last year, the Research and Assessment Department, along with the EL Department, and the assessment team have began the work in terms of developing a district-wide plan focused on English language learners to make sure that we're doing all that we can to ensure success of those students. And so looking at the assessment plan for our EL students, figuring out if the assessments we currently offer are the most appropriate, and if not, what should we be replacing them with, and so forth. And so now that we have covered all of the strategies and measurement results that were the focus for last year, the remainder of the presentation is going to look at the data. And you'll see that it says priority result of our strategies, academic achievement, because ultimately academic achievement is the goal and the outcome for all of the strategies that we've just covered. And so to begin with, on your screen is data from the 2017-18 STAR SGP, or Student Growth Percentile, and so it's showing their performance. And again, as I mentioned, the STAR test is administered fall, winter, spring, and in the spring, student scores are compared to their fall scores to determine how much growth they had throughout the course of the year. One thing with the student growth percentiles is that it is based on students' academic peers. So when we're talking about growth, the amount of growth that a student has is determined not only by their grade level, but also by their achievement level. So if you have a high-achieving third grader, their growth will be determined by comparing them to other high-achieving third graders. If you have a lower-achieving fifth grader, that student's growth will be compared to other lower-achieving fifth graders. And that's because we know that depending on where a student is on that scale, their growth trajectories will look different. And so students on the lower end tend to be able to have a steeper growth trajectory than students who are at the higher end. But we want to make sure that we're growing all students. And so to do that, the purpose of this is to say, okay, well, we know that this student is high achieving, but relative to other high achieving students, are they growing an average amount, an accelerated amount, not enough, and so forth. And so with that taken into consideration, you can see that again, K through 10 in our district, 26% of students had growth percentiles that fell within the average or meets range, and 33% had growth percentiles that fell within the exceeds range. So their growth put them in the 66th percentile or higher compared to students who were in their same grade at a similar academic achievement level. And the numbers are actually very similar for math. So again, for now in looking at math, about 25% of our students had growth in that average year's worth of growth or meets range, and 35% had it in the accelerated or exceeds range. And this is exactly what we would hope and want to see, with almost 60% of students having at least average growth to accelerated growth. Oh, sorry, yes.
So I'm sorry if you want questions at the end, but it's just about when you're explaining the growth part, and I appreciate that because I think that I just got it. So when you have students that are so I get makes sense when you're comparing the growth, but so when you have students that are growing that are not performing well, that are on the lower side. And they are growing, and they're growing relatively to the other students. When do we look at if those students are moving into another level, or how does that work? Because if we just continue to see how they grow relatively to the others, well, they might still stack all the time.
Exactly. So the results that I'm showing on the screen, again, are the SGP, which is the student growth percentile, and it's in basically the students will get a percentile rank between 1 and 99, and you would interpret it just like you would any other percentile. And so the students in the exceeds would be in the 66th percentile or above. What you're talking about would be the scale score, which is another data point that teachers also look at. And there are different targets that are set for fall, winter, and spring by grade level. And so in order to determine if a student is meeting their grade level target, their scale score would have to hit that mark. And so that's the measure to see, okay, well, even if we had a student who came, behind grade level, so they started off behind grade level, and they're in the exceeds category for growth, so they made more than a year's worth of growth, but are they at grade level now? We would then look at the scale score to see if they hit that target. Yep.
As long as we're sneaking in questions, hypothetically, if in the lower range of performance, that academic peer group, everybody is doing poorly with those students, but a district we're doing somewhat less poorly, that would show up positive here. Would that be
You're saying that if everyone was not doing well,
well,
but someone...
if the progress being made all throughout Minnesota or the nation of people in the lower, of kids that are in the lower peer group, if they're not doing so good in getting them to where they need to be, that really kind of goes to what Monica's saying.
Then in terms of growth, you can
we're patting ourselves on the back because we did better than some other people that didn't do even worse. But it's not, without knowing the other piece of the puzzle, we don't really know everything we need to know.
I see what you're saying, because you're basically saying that if students in the lower achieving area are not growing as fast, but their scores are still pretty low, and there's a group that's also not growing very fast, but their group have slightly higher scores than the other, then it would give them higher percentile ranks for growth.
I mean, it's not entirely hypothetical. We have an issue nationwide with how we're doing with kids that are behind. And so in order, it seems to me, and I think I'm sort of agreeing with Monica, in order for us as a state to reach the ultimate goal of really doing well with those kids, we can't just compare ourselves to how everybody's doing.
Right. That is true, and that is why we also make sure that we're tracking how students are doing relative to those grade level targets to see how close they are to hitting them, if they have hit them or even exceeded them. And related to that, I can actually skip ahead slightly to this particular chart, which is related to my mention of the consistent use of STAR results throughout the district. And so one particular report that's provided from STAR is a state performance report. And it can be generated after every benchmark, or after the fall and winter benchmarks. And it basically predicts the percentage and number of students by grade level who will likely be proficient on the MCA. And so what you see on the screen, the red bars represent the STAR predictions following the winter benchmark period in STAR, and this is for reading. And the winter benchmark typically takes place in late December or January, depending on the grade level. And the yellow bar then shows what the actual 2018 MCA proficiency rates were. And so you can see that for a number of the grades, STAR was actually quite close in predicting what the proficiency rates would be. And for others, it was actually under predicting, which is what we want, because again, students take this in the winter. They don't take the MCAs until April. And so if we have predictions of what data will look like, we still have months to work with our students, and there's still months there for them to grow and have more exposure to curriculum. This is also useful because We receive these types of reports very high level, like you're seeing at a district level, but in the classroom, the teachers have a teacher version of this report where it gives them a list of students who are identified as being on the pathway to proficiency and below the pathway to proficiency. And so it identifies students, it lists their SCALE scores as well as skills that need to be targeted for specific students. So it's just more information that can be used then to make sure that all students are learning the standards, their grade level standards, and then hopefully that will also be reflected when it comes to MCA time. Okay, I'll go back to one of the slides that I skipped. So another celebration that focuses on academic achievement that we want to report out is the performance of our English language learners. And so these particular bars on the screen are reflecting MCA performance. And red, as always, reflects does not meet, yellow partially meets, green is meets, and blue is exceeds. One bar is the non-EL, which represents students who are not EL learners. The middle bar, the former four-year ELs, are students who were formerly EL students. They exited within the past 4 years. So students who are no longer receiving EL services, who have exited within the past 4 years. And then the bar on the far right represents the performance of our students who are currently English language learners. And this is the most recent 2018 MCA data. And the main takeaway here is that when you look at the former Ls, so students who exited the program within the past 4 years, relative first to the current EL students, you can see that there's far more green and blue, which is what we would want to see in terms of proficiency on the MCA. But then also when you compare the performance of our former four-year Ls to our students who are not EL students, we're also seeing comparable performance. And that's also exactly what we want to see. We want to see our students who went through our English language program being proficient and exceeding on the MCA tests. Okay, so now let's go here. We would be remiss without mentioning our early childhood students because our strategies also focus pre-K through 12. And so some of this data was actually presented to you by Julie Midas a couple months ago, but it's taken from the Teaching Strategies Gold or TS Gold assessment and it's a sampling of some of the developmental areas that are measured by that assessment and the percentage of students in the 3-year-old and 4-year-old categories that are meeting or exceeding these expectations by the end of the year. So for example, in the social emotional domain, for 3-year-olds, by spring, 83% were observed by their teachers to be meeting or exceeding the expectations. And for our 4-year-old cohort, 98% of the students were observed by their teachers to be meeting or exceeding expectations in that domain. And again, we just picked a couple, so there's also physical as well as language reflected there. Yes.
Dr. Huff, could I just ask a question on that? That indicates that of our 4-year-olds in our early childhood program, 96% of them are at expectations for language development. Correct?
That is what that is. Based on the TS Gold assessment in terms of their...
Right. What percentage of those students would be EL students?
Of the early childhood program, I would have to check with Julie and get back to you. I don't know that
But would this chart be indicating that down the road we could be expecting that the academic achievement as measured on standardized tests for EL students will grow dramatically?
If they attended our early childhood.
If they attended our early childhood programs, right. I realize these are students in our early childhood programs. That's pretty significant, I think, maybe.
We had actually been having dialogue about this for a couple years because this is a test that everybody gets near 100 on, and it causes one to think that it's not really a test of what you're thinking it is. And, you know, for a couple of years I've been asking whoever would listen, what does this really test? And the literature says it's valid, but it doesn't say what it's valid for. I really do believe it's not a program evaluation, but it's teachers reporting that they did okay on the things that they were trying to do. If this were true, then when these kids go to, I'm going to have several concerns about one of them is we desperately need to know what value is being added in early childhood because we're advocating for putting a lot of money into it. And we also need to know, because there's a split in the early childhood community about whether it's a good idea to help kids in phonics and reading and so on or not. And some teachers believe in it and some don't. And if that's our intent, to get them phonically ready for reading, and this test doesn't test that, then we're not getting that feedback. It just can't possibly be that it's testing what you're thinking it's testing.
So then what is the social-emotional testing?
I do believe this is a teacher self-report.
Yeah.
They do something, they try it, they get a result they like, and they fill out a form that says I did okay, and it helps them do okay. But I just, with respect, and you're not the inventor of this test, it's a nationally published test that early childhood people love to use. And I don't know that there's an alternative, but it isn't doing what we think it's doing.
Shannon?
Is these percentages here for early childhood, have they changed in the last 5 years? Have we been consistently reporting in the 90s?
So I can speak to the last couple years, and the results from 2018 and 2017 were very similar.
So then it seems like we do have a gap between the 3 and 4 year olds and early elementary school.
I think that Lori's earlier point was a good one in that this is only reflecting the performance of the students who go through our early childhood program and not all the students in our kindergarten class. And then also that this is really looking at students' performance and expectation of their developmental area and like readiness, but it's not measuring reading skills and kindergarten performance. And so even with language, it's assessing their receptive and productive language. So being able to listen to instructions, follow out those instructions, which are very different than phonological awareness and basic foundational reading skills. And so I think it's just being able to clearly delineate what skills are being assessed by this test and what those look-fors are that the teachers are looking for. Because if for language we have in mind reading, but really it's just saying if I tell a student instructions and they know to follow them in order and get it, then they can get a check. Then those are two very different things.
Mr. Chairman, but if I could say, the people who are advocating for putting a ton of money into early childhood are promising more than this, and they should be. I mean, it's possible to do that. I don't agree that the gap between 96 and what's happening in first and second grade is that there's some giant fallout. I think you've given the explanation. Yeah. It's that we may be teaching to those things, but we're not testing for them, and whether we should test for them or not, I don't know, but it just seems to me critical if we're going to ever do what I think we all want to do, which is to have a really strong, robust financial support at the state level. We should be able to find out if we're doing something one of the things we talked about, and that it's been several years of tracking those kids, the ones that we give, and seeing how they're doing in first and second grade, segregating that out. And it's been said that we're relying on Partners for Student Success to do that, but I don't think that's, I'm not blaming you for that answer, but it seems to me that's an unacceptable answer, that this is our job. We should know, are we getting dramatic improvement with those kids? And we may well, but it would be a great argument for more money in early childhood.
Mm-hmm. Monica? Go ahead.
Okay, and so another area that we wanted to highlight was our graduation rates. And so our graduation rates continue to rise. As of the most recent cohort of rates that we have, which is up through the 2017 rate, because we won't know the 2018 graduation rate until February, the averages, the 3-year average of our 4-year graduation rates for both Tech and Apollo are still higher than the state. Also, between 2016 and 2017, McKinley's 4-year graduation rate increased 14 percentage points. So we're also seeing McKinley's graduation rate on the rise. And as I mentioned, just our district trajectory is going the right way. Related to graduation and then post-graduation success, a highlight that was not mentioned during the core planning presentation because at the time the data was not available relates to AP performance. And so we gave the core planning presentation back in April, and then in May our students take their AP examinations and we get the results over the summer. And we found that of our AP test takers this past school year, 71% received at least an AP score of 3 or higher. And so that's significant because scores of 3 or higher have been found to be highly predictive of college readiness as well as college graduation. Scores of 3 or higher also are likely to earn students college credit. But even more than that, the 71% of our students who have at least one score of 3 or higher is compared to only 67% of AP test takers in the state of Minnesota and only 61% of AP test takers globally. So for our AP test takers, again, we have 71% of them who are earning scores of 3 or higher, and that's compared to only 61% of AP test takers globally and 67% in the state. So that's a very exciting celebration when we're looking at performance of our seniors as they're getting ready to go on beyond our district. Let's see. Okay, so moving slightly away from academic achievement into the area of social emotional learning, some of our successes, very briefly, we can focus on the student support room. As I mentioned, the SEL coordinator spent a lot of time this past school year streamlining the PBIS efforts and really putting an emphasis on the proper use of the student support rooms within our district. And so ideally these rooms are used in a proactive manner rather than reactive. And so the goal last year was to decrease the number of reactive uses or responses for the room and increase the number of proactive responses. And our buildings did a great job in making sure that that was the case. And just as some examples for you, proactive responses would be things like social skills groups, energy breaks. It's really just these pre-planned interventions for either individual students or groups of students. So definitely just being proactive instead of having to react to something that took place and then trying to put out a fire, if you will, for an incident. Another celebration related to social emotional learning and likely also the use of these proactive interventions is that we saw a 5% decrease in our out-of-school suspensions at our high school level. So again, this is also something that we wanted to highlight and make you all aware of. Okay, and I will turn it over to Lori for some other celebrations.
She can come back up for questions if you want. The next 2 slides that you're going to see are some samples of other student celebrations because we know that our academic performance isn't the only thing that we have to celebrate with our students. So as you're reading through some of these, again, they're just a sample. There's many more that we could have put up here. But as you read these, I just want to let you know that what you saw tonight was a brief summary. Nothing that you saw should be a surprise to you, because every presentation that happens throughout the school year is really related back to our strategic plan. We're really proud of the accomplishments, but we know that we're not done yet. There's a lot that we still have that we can improve on and that we can do better. When you think about the things that have happened since 2014, when our strategic plan was put into place, everything that has happened in these 5 years has been a direct result of our strategic plan and related back to our strategic plan. Our talent development program that you've heard about over the last couple of years that has expanded and shown such great results. Our resource review and curriculum review. Our calendar itself with the embedded professional development. The increase in community involvement that we have in our district. Our CTE programming. All of our building projects, our new buildings, have been a result of things that we have learned, that we've heard from community, that we've heard from parents, that we've heard from students and staff. So a lot of things that we can be very, very proud of in our district. And that's the exciting thing that we have to show. So where are we at? You have this document, and I know that the one that's up here is too small for you to see, but every year we bring forward our priority results for the upcoming year. Just a quick reminder, what you see as checks are things that the core planning team and superintendent and his cabinet have said, we have these in place. They never go away. We're never done with them. We continue to work on them and approve them, but they're things that are systems. They're in place in our district. The areas that are bold are our priority focuses for this year. So you have this document also that you can look at. It's also, after tonight's meeting, will be posted on our website. So what's next? Our plan goes through this year. We have been talking about our what next for over a year. I think we've always had in mind that this is a 5-year plan, but we know that it doesn't go away at the end of 5 years, that we need to continue to have some focus areas. So tonight was the summary. As I said, we've been talking about our what next for over a year. At our next work session in November, I'm going to put you to work. And I'm going to make you identify some of those critical issues that you see that we should focus on next as a district. We'll be gathering input from multiple stakeholders as we talk about those what nexts. And at that November work session, we'll share with you a timeline for what we think is next. So it's not over, but it's over for this year. Any questions for any of us?
Jeff? I got just a couple. For Dr. Huff, that SLEDS data?
Yes.
Is it vibrant data that maybe we could use to help track open enrollment, to track other stuff?
I don't think it would necessarily be helpful for open enrollment, because we could really only track our students. So if they're open enrolling out, then we wouldn't have access to that information, unless I'm misunderstanding your question.
I thought it was statewide data on every kid, unique numbering.
Yes.
And where they graduate.
But, so, I mean, maybe there is a public file. The file that I use is for our student tracking. So I'd have to get back to you to see if we would be able to track individual students that aren't ours with the number. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Because we don't have access to students' data or information, or even their student numbers that aren't a part of our district. So like I wouldn't know necessarily who to pull that open enrolled out, if that makes sense. But I can still check. I will look into it and see.
Please do. And then Tammy, my second question was United Way. It's always at Lincoln and Discovery?
The neighborhood resource centers, we have a 3-year memorandum of understanding, and those 2 sites are the pilot sites. United Way certainly is interested in expanding that. But that is the partnership we have in place right now.
Yes.
So 1 year of the 3-year.
And they want to expand too if it's successful, which it obviously is?
Yeah,
Good. Okay.
they do.
Thanks.
Bruce Henches.
Yeah, first thing I would say is thanks to all of you for the report and obviously to the entire staff in this district and leadership in this district for execution of the strategic plan and the things that we're doing. I mean, I hope any of us could talk to any community member at length about the great things that are going on in District 742. There's just no question about it that we are making every effort to reach every student in our school district. A couple of things that I wanted to just make a comment about or go back to. One would be to that reading score again. That's kind of sticking with me now. For reading readiness for preschool students. I understand that 40% of the students who actually come to us in kindergarten have gone through our preschool program. Is that about a ballpark figure? So I know that it's a limited sample there, but I think that the public could look at that and go, 96% of your fourth graders are ready for reading. Now let's look at MCA scores in third grade, and how are they doing? And is somebody dropping the ball here, or what's the problem? I think we should make sure that what they're measuring fits, and I think it's kind of what Mr. Von Korf was saying. The other thing that I don't know if this is a comment or a question, it ends up in a question, but our focus is academic achievement for students. And we mentioned early on that we start the academic year with goal-setting conferences in the elementary level and now into the middle school level with teacher, parent, and student setting goals, I presume academic goals, for that student. In this scenario, where the parent, teacher, and student set goals, and the parent and student feel like they are getting the support and help they need to reach their individual goals, and the STAR data shows that they're making progress. But the MCA comes along and they're not proficient. Have we been successful with that student?
Oh, yeah, sure. So I wasn't sure if that was rhetorical or if
It is really kind of rhetorical, but since Lori jumped up,
I love to answer rhetorical questions. I think that success is measured in a lot of different ways. So academics is one way to measure success. Would we like all of our students to be performing at grade level or above? Absolutely, we would. So I think that's why we also look at growth, because we want to make sure that our students are growing and making that exceeded growth so that eventually they can catch up. But I think there's a lot of things. When I hear about some of the goals that are set by families and teachers together, it's not always just academic goals. So for some students, it might be some of the socially emotional goals. So there's a lot of ways that we measure success. Academics is one of them. Can we do more? Absolutely.
Thank you.
Shannon.
Kind of staying on that, going back to the STAR reading results and STAR math results, I guess I always misunderstood the pie charts that were represented here. I thought that, say you have a student that's exactly at grade level, and then they take the STAR test, and then they take in the fall, then they take it in the spring, and then I'm measuring their 9 months or their year growth, and if they were on target for what was expected for that full year, that full 9 months, they were meeting or exceeding. So I always interpreted the does not meet and partial meets, meaning they didn't have the growth for that time period. But that's not what this is reflecting.
Correct. So that isn't. So that is not how the STAR growth outputs. And really, they want teachers to be able to make sure that they're growing all students. And in order to do that, you have to compare like students because you want to make sure that you're not only helping your students who might have lower scores grow, but also the students at the higher range, and comparing them to each other. They would have different growth trajectories. And so the way that they calculate their growth percentiles is based on comparing like students.
And I think you have presented before, but I don't know where, when we get those reports for the students who have had at least one full year of growth and comparing those numbers. When do we?
Those are typically reported out during the schools, the principal reports for their individual buildings.
Okay, thank you.
Jerry?
We looked at this, I say we, it was just me at the last committee meeting, but that meant you had to be tremendously patient because I peppered you with lots of questions, but I just can't tell you how much I appreciate the willingness of the team that really you've assembled to not be defensive when you're challenged, and when the board says, what about this, what about this? We have a robust, thoughtful discussion, and it's just really a joy to be on a board where if you ask a stupid question, you still answer it, or a hard question, you still answer it. And the presentation was great at our meeting, and the presentation is great here, and I want to echo what, there's some things about our strategic plan over the years that have frustrated me about the procedure, but what the administration has done with the plan, the things that you've done, I mean, you listed just a few things, but there's just a whole bunch of things that have actually been done. One of the things that we're doing on our committee, and hopefully the three of us will do the next time, is to try and spend extra time working with the staff to talk about the issues that need to get passed on to the new board on how are we going to do the next strategic plan. One of the things I'd like to ask, not so much about the past, but just in thinking about the future, is there anything in this 5 years about the strategic plan other than the initial adoption that has required board action? In other words, is it just report? Is that the way we've been structured? And I'm not trying to engender a discussion about that, but I would when we talk about what we should tell the next board about the next 5 years. Were there built into our plan, and then should we think about whether there should be some, so we're not acting on this, we're not accepting this report, we haven't been asked to accept it, and if the board had concerns about it, we wouldn't have a mechanism as a board to do something about that, and I'm not saying we do, but it feels to me like this, the only board action other than listening to the report has been the initial adoption of the plan. The rest has been, is that fair?
Budget.
No.
The budget.
So I would say that a little bit differently if I'm understanding the question correctly, Jerry. When you say does the board do anything else as it relates to the strategic plan? And I heard Chair Dahlgren talk about the budget. So there's so many different things that we bring to you as an administration that's based on a strategic plan, where we're talking about different programmings such as TDAS, or talent development, or the AVID program, or and there's just so many different things, so I'm faulty at the moment. But we've come to the board, talked about it as it relates to the strategic plan, and then the board has either supported it or not.
Yep, I get that, and that makes sense, but what I'm saying is if the core planning team comes back with a list of priorities for the next year, or if they evaluate performance on the plan, that's entirely administration. And again, I'm not being critical, because I think that's something that we need to talk about going forward, but I want to be sure that that's kind of where we are, is, yes, you come to us and say, we should do talent development better because that's consistent with our strategic plan, and I'm asking you to support that. You need to support it in order for us to do it, and in that sense, we are part of the strategic plan. I get that.
Any further questions? Bruce?
So I'd like to get into this discussion in some way, and I'm not quite sure how to do it. That's consistent with my governance role. First of all, Bruce, I'd like to attach myself to those congratulatory remarks you made. I want to attach myself right to them. They were great. Thank you. I think you spoke for the whole board, right from your heart.
Thank you.
Secondly, just an observation, when we showed up the strategic one slide earlier, we saw that graphic, that box with all of those words in it, and you explained that the larger words were most often used by licensed and non-licensed staff, and presumably the smaller words were less talked about. Boy, I squinted, I looked hard, I leaned in, and I didn't see school board anyplace. To me, I think that's telling us something, tells me something, I think, means something to me. So, how do I get into this thing? I'll just retreat to the key works of school boards, the 8 things that we do our work in. We do our work in vision, standards, assessment, accountability, alignment of resources, climate and culture, community partnerships, and continuous improvement. That's what we overview. That's how we do our work. And that's how I try to listen as deep as I can. I try to think as deep as I can. And I try to speak as deep as I can. But I certainly am listening to everybody else. But the one thing here that does jump out to me is number 5, key words, alignment of resources. I think that to me is key for this discussion. And so I would just pose the question. Maybe it's a rhetorical question, but I'll just pose the question, and if anybody wants to answer it, there's certainly, I'd be interested to hear. Number 1, does the strategic plan presented this evening and the strategic plan outlined in the AEI document align with each other? Are they in alignment with each other? I'm just curious. Maybe I can answer myself, I don't know. Number 2, does the strategic plan align with our human, our program, and our financial resources? We have to be in alignment to the resources we have. And I'm imagining that that's something that's always, an eye is always kept on. Are we proposing to do things that we have the human capital, the programmatic capital, the financial capital to achieve? Is there an alignment there? And then thirdly, lastly, I write this down. Does the strategic plan align with the protocols, the practices, the procedures, the duties, the tasks, and the responsibilities of our operational and instructional core of professional educators? I didn't just come up just sit here. This is not just talking extemporaneously. I thought about this, and so I wrote it down. And so I really just want to put those things out there. To me, it's the alignment. Are we aligned with each other? Are we aligned in all three areas of governance, operations, and instruction? Are we aligned with our resources? I just think that's key. And of course, I could drop in a comment or two about community partnerships in regards to what I hear, but that's unnecessary. Mr. Chair, that's all I have to say. Did you like that? Did that sound good?
Yes, Bruce.
Thank you.
Any further comments? If not, thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
And I believe at the work session, we will be digging into opportunities for the next strategic plan. Next up is Adam Holm, and he is going to give us a summary of the October workshop.
Good evening, Chairperson Dahlgren, Superintendent Jett, and school board members. The following is the October 3rd work session summary. We started with the new Tech High School update. Kyle Walter, on-site project manager, along with David Leopold, architect, presented an update on the progress of the new Tech High School. Kyle reported on the progress through September. He shared photos and a drone video of the progress. Scheduled activities were reviewed, and an updated summary was provided. Next, we had a summer programming update. Pat King, Director of Title Programs, and a team of others provided information on programming and partnerships with the district in providing their summer programming. We currently have summer programs that serve 4,400 students. Information was shared on the impact of summer school, including reading and math achievement data. We also learned that approximately 38,900 breakfast and lunches were served through a partnership with the YES Network. That was followed up by a process for requesting RFPs for architectural designs for potential long-term solutions for the gymnastics program and or other activities. Amy Scholarud presented information on 3 potential options. Board members agreed to ask Superintendent Jett to work with the activities director and the architect to determine what is feasible and bring to the board a permanent gymnastics solution. That is my summary.
Thank you, Adam. Tonight, there are no discussion or action items, so we're going to move right on into the superintendent's report.
Good evening. Good evening, Chair Dahlgren, members of the board. First and foremost, Tech, I'll start with students. Tech senior, Clifford Jolstrom, they call him Tom, received a perfect ACT score. His perfect score will open quite a few doors for him for post-secondary education, but he currently has his eye on the University of Minnesota. He plans on obtaining a degree in computer science to financially establish himself. He wants to build a reserve to eventually enter into politics. If you've ever had a chance to meet Tom, I suggest, if you haven't, I suggest you have that conversation with that young man. Yes, he is. 5 students and 2 staff members from McKinley Area Learning Center participated in the 25th annual MapStars Learning Leadership Conference on October 10th and 11th. The conference was held at Lake Beauty Camp in Long Prairie and involved over 150 students from alternative schools and charter schools from around the state. Each fall, the Leadership Conference offers a chance for member schools to send students and staff to the 2-day workshop in order to develop leadership skills, teamwork, and time to organize events for the year. The McKinley Area Learning Center is a member of this organization. It's an acronym, and it stands for Success, Teamwork, Achievement, Recognition, and Self-Esteem. And if anybody's ever seen or witnessed our students attend that, it's a big deal. They're excited about it. They dress up for it, and it's a great 2-day event. This summer, French students from Tech and Apollo high schools traveled to explore the northern half of France. They put their language skills to the test as they ordered fresh pastries at local bakeries, explored artistic masterpieces such as the Mona Lisa, and navigated Paris's subway system. After experiencing central Paris, the group left for the countryside to explore various castles, and I can't pronounce this, Rare Valley, the fortified port of Saint Malo and climbed, I should have asked somebody this, I should ask the students beforehand so I can make sure I was pronouncing it correctly. They also spent time at various World War II sites along Omaha Beach where they paid their respects to fallen heroes at the American Cemetery in Normandy. Second, lastly, or a couple things, a teacher, Cheryl Novosensky, was named Teacher of the Week by radio station 96.7, The River. She is a teacher at Kennedy. And alumna and author Hapso Muhammad visited Talahi Community School and Lincoln Elementary School with Mayor Dave Kleiss. The pair read her new book, It Only Takes One Yes, and she read that to 4th and 5th grade students. Hapso also currently works for the UN. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that the Tech boys soccer team qualified for the state meet, and so I have a young person who would, if that's not quoted by me on this thing, on the microphone, would be, I wouldn't be able to go home. And then the last thing that I'm going to end is it's also, that's one individual in my house, the other individual, it is her 15th birthday, so I ask everybody here to pray for me. She's getting her, what do you call that, permit license tomorrow. So here we go. That concludes my superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Jett. Next, we have standing committee reports. Board Development Policy and Governance, Shannon Hawes.
We met September 25th, I believe, yes, the 25th, Tuesday morning, and we worked on the governance manual. Jerry, we meet next Tuesday if you want to discuss that word, as well as topics for the board retreat in December. And we will continue on both of those tracks when we meet next week on Tuesday. Thank you.
Yes, one more comment.
One more student comment, because I'm scanning the room and what I missed was tennis. And so the girls' tennis team is a qualifier for the state competition also. And I think we have someone who is near and dear to that program and pays real attention. That concludes my superintendent's report.
Thank you. Next, we go to the Community Linkages and Engagement Committee. Bruce Mose.
Community Linkage Engagement Committee met on last Thursday, October 11th. You have that report in front of you. I've never read it before, but some do read it, so let me do some reading. So Kate Bukowski, Director of the Roosevelt Education Center, and Carol Potter, Executive Director of Special Education and Student Services, presented to our committee. Appropriate place to start was just to go back and remember that fire in the summer of 2014 that destroyed pretty much the Roosevelt building. And the staff did a great job relocating students, and the new Roosevelt Education Center has been rebuilt around part of that old building. Kate Bukowski, Director of Alternative Programs, presented. The REC process is to help students show their strengths and get them ready for graduation. They are atypical behavior students, and a community member who is a veteran recently wrote a poem of what he sees on a daily basis, complimenting the REC students and staff. Carol, remind us what REC means again. Roosevelt Education Center, is that the same thing? Okay, thank you. Kate shared some pictures of staff from last spring and fall, including staff from Journey Home and InStep. Students have emotional behavior needs, and they have a smaller environment. They provide social and emotional support to students, and they teach them to recognize their strengths and not their weaknesses. The ACE program, Adolescent Childhood Experiences, are taking a look at the effects of trauma. Often students come to REC because they are acting out in the classroom or have emotional behaviors. District 742 does not administer ACEs testing, but mental health facilitator staff work closely with students in the schools. ACE affects students across the district, not just at Roosevelt. To identify students that have ACE comes from the school's mental health facilitator. Teachers have training to deal with trauma in the classroom. Teachers have training to deal with trauma in the classroom. Staff will ask students what has happened to you in your life rather than why are you behaving like this. Strategies for trauma are effective for all students in the classroom. Some students are identified as SPED students, special education students. Level 4 is a setting that means that 50% of services are received outside of a mainstream building, excluding a hospital setting. The needs are greater than what can be served in the homeschool. IEP teams determine placement. Students can cycle back to their home schools. Roosevelt's currently at 21 or 22 level at elementary and 29 at the high school level. Capacity is 24 for elementary and 32 for high school, and it will be at capacity by Thanksgiving. Preference is to keep students in their home schools. The focus is on their needs. What's not written here, but what I observed and remarked at the meeting is that it will soon be, sometime, I imagine, an administrative recommendation that there will need to be increased space, facility space at REC, because it is stuffed. Transitioning is based on an individual basis. REC cannot offer as many electives as high schools, so students may shuttle back and forth to their high school. The most effective way to transition back is slowly. Kids can access their activities in their home schools, and it is encouraged they do so. In the summer, they do offer extended school year for 5 weeks, for 4 days a week, for 5 weeks, for 4 days a week. Most students qualify for extended school year. Summer school staffing can be challenging. Many teachers need a break. In this program, they try to do activities in the community. All these students at REC take the MCAs. The Journey program is a special program with students, for students that have aggressive behavior. Space is available and doors can be locked. There are currently 5 students in this program, 9th grade to 21. 5 of them are autistic. There are 2 teaching staff plus additional support staff. Programming is individual with each student as needs are unique. Many are nonverbal. They do not take the MCAs. The ABS program, current teachers have this licensure and they are not supposed to see level or three or four students. Teachers at Roosevelt have special licensure to work with these students. Staffing is in the spring and it's based on skill levels and licensure to balance the school. The suspension rate is low. Students are sent home when their behavior can't be regulated. Are there community partnerships? Community partnerships. United Way has lunch with students. They have partnerships with St. John's University and College of St. Benedict's. And they brought in some mime clowns recently. They taught them old school clowning techniques. This fall they had drumming at St. John's University. They do a lot of work with therapists and families. The staff is mostly white, but they are trying to recruit staff of color. Prior to this program, students were in their buildings and high school was at City Life. There is currently a collaboration with the Boys and Girls Club with individual students, community partnership, Boys and Girls Club with individual students. And tonight, last Thursday, it was a family night with pizza and a movie. Next meeting will be November 8th. That's my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Bruce. And I would say that the Roosevelt Education Center is kind of a invisible school within our district, but I would say that since it was built and the programs were opened up in that school, I would, as a board member, I have heard many fewer parent concerns from the rest of the schools in the district directed at the board because those students are getting the support and help that they need at Roosevelt. And I believe that that has a lot to do with it. Even though we don't talk about Roosevelt very much, and it's, like I said, it's kind of an invisible school in the district, I think it plays a really, really big role.
And if you ever have the opportunity to request of the executive director to be in attendance sometime, she'll certainly invite you, all of us, and when you're there, you do see some incredible educating taking place. And it's just remindful that they get these students ready so that the teacher can appear. It's not until the student is ready that the teacher will appear. And they do that with great skill and determination. It's a great program, great school.
Yes. Thank you. Finance and Audit Committee, Jeff Polrice.
We did meet on October 11th. Present there was yourself, Willie Jett, myself, Monica Sakura Schwartz, Amy Skullerud, Gary Ganji, Scott Andreasen. We did have a couple guests, Kyle Walter and Mike Spanier were there. We did have one observer, a young gentleman named John Fruth. He's an SCSU graduate student. He's actually was at a school board meeting here last time. We had very limited topics. The one was a new tech budget update and change orders. Kyle handed out and reviewed a list of change orders that will be coming to the next board meeting. There was no change orders coming to the board meeting tonight. We did discuss some of the larger proposed change orders that are coming down our way. Amy Sculder had handed out a list of excess properties. It's basically a list of properties that the district currently owns that is not using. Very short meeting, and that's it.
Thank you. Next up is the Legislative Committee. Bruce Henches.
Mr. Chair and board members, the Legislative Committee met on September 21st, which was primarily a meeting to plan the October 11th Legislative Candidate Forum on Education Issues, and that is the summary that I've put on your at your places this evening. And just to go through that quickly, as I said, it was on Thursday, October 11th. It was moderated by Bruce Watkins, who did a great job of keeping people on task, and Jeff Polrice served as our timer, and Shannon Hawes and Bruce Mose as ushers. We did have representation from all of the local candidates from Senate District 13. It's the only Senate race in Minnesota this year, as well as House 13A and 13B and House 14A. So a total of 8 candidates answering questions. There was a strong support for public education expressed by all of the candidates. And just to go through some of these areas, one of our topic areas had to do with funding, actually restoring the commitment and funding to public education. All of the candidates supported significant increases in the basic formula. And in fact, the increases went from 3% to 10% as they went around the table here and expressed their concern for the needs of public education. And then there were several questions on special education, and they all expressed an understanding of the challenges that districts like 742 face with a large special education cross-subsidy and a commitment to do something of significance about it. Regarding preschool, pre-kindergarten, and school readiness, again, they all showed strong support for some type of preschool funding. There was some differences as to whether they would express that through scholarships that follow the student to private child care facilities or to public school programs. We did ask specifically the question of whether they would support funding at least at the level that it is for this coming year. And the pre-K, voluntary pre-K funding and school readiness run out at the end of this year. And they, to a person, said that yes, they would support at least restoring that funding. In the area of vouchers, there were some differences among the candidates. Some strongly opposed vouchers, tax credits, or other means of support for private education with public dollars that would be drawn from the state general fund. Others emphasized the importance of school choice, but all of them said that if public monies follow students to private schools, those private schools must follow the same mandates as public schools do. And then the last question was asked by an audience member, and that was for each candidate to talk about the experiences they have had working with a broader community of youth, elderly, and minorities. And frankly, I personally was very impressed with their answer. to a person. They are not newcomers to public service. They have all had extensive backgrounds in working with various community groups throughout their careers. And so community service is a lifelong commitment for them, not just something they decided to do as they're running for office right now. And so we complimented them on their commitment to the public good. The Legislative Committee has informed our legislative candidates that once the election is over, we look forward to meeting again with them to review our District 742 School Board legislative platform and agenda for the 2019 season. We will be setting up that meeting in December. And then regarding our platform, the committee has spent some time reviewing our platform from last year. It is pretty clear to us that our platform will focus on adequately funding early education, especially at the minimum that is currently being funded through the voluntary pre-K and school readiness program, as well as, I don't know if I said special education or preschool education there, but both addressing the special education cross-subsidy and adequately funding preschool education will be key parts of our proposed legislative platform, which we will be bringing to the board for approval at our next board meeting here on November 14th, so that we then have a completed and approved document to discuss with our legislators in early December. That's our report.
Thank you. Next is Personnel and Negotiations Committee. Monica Segura Schwartz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We didn't meet this month. We're meeting next month.
Thank you. And last but not least, Achievement, Integration, and Equity Committee, Jerry Von Korf.
We had a meeting that I had hoped would bring different board member perspectives together to discuss strategic planning, to help the board get ready for strategic planning. Unfortunately, two of the three members could not make the meeting, and and because there are different perspectives on this, and there have historically been different perspectives on the board, it was my hope that we would use the committee to help prepare so that those perspectives could be heard. After that discussion, I prepared a report and circulated it amongst the members and asked if they wanted to get together again so that their perspective could be included. I got no request to do that, but it's pretty clear that there are different perspectives. I would say, as I personally push to look at what the new statute requires, that we could hope that we could find a way to help the new board get the benefit of whatever we know about the process, so that they can participate both this year and of course next year. We have the two front runners sitting in the audience, and they're front runners because they got the most votes, and usually the front runners win, and so maybe the two people sitting out there, this is going to be partly your problem. I would hope that we could talk about what we're going to do, what the new board is going to do, without too much getting into, since we did it this way, we have to do it exactly the way we did it, because this is the first time this board has ever done it for a long time, and we've learned from that. I just want to say, so that we can think through a way of avoiding having kind of what I think we started hearing in response to what I said earlier. I was a board member that was very interested in strategic planning. I was twice asked to please withdraw from being on the strategic planning and then the core planning team so that another board member who really, really wanted to be on could be on. And I did that on both occasions as gracefully as I could. And but I had expected that not being on those planning teams would not then make it illegitimate for me to have views on the work of those two organizations. I do feel that over the last 5 years, there's been a sense in which the board, and Member Mose, you sort of said that about when you said that there was nothing on the slip from the board, and I think it needs to be open for dialogue as to whether the Board of Education has a greater role in helping frame the next strategic plan. That doesn't mean that the last one was terrible, but I think we have to have that dialogue. And I just want to point out that the new Minnesota law that was not in existence when this one, but shortly after was passed, says at a school board meeting, the board shall adopt a long-term strategic plan, and then it lists a bunch of requirements, including robust educational outcomes. And it requires the board annually to adopt a budget commensurate with implementing that strategic plan. And we can argue about how much the board should be involved. Obviously, the superintendent and his team play a leading role, and the board can decide how rigorously it wants to implement the statutory requirement that the strategic plan is the board's strategic plan, and that's going to be the decision of the new board. I just put it to you, if the board is going to have representatives on the teams, that it cannot be said then by those board members that the rest of the board members should have nothing to say because it's a violation of the governance principle. And I think we need to work through this. And again, we'd be here all night if we tried to work through it. My hope is that when the committee meets next, and maybe the Board Development Committee meets next, we'll find a way to work through that works for the superintendent and the district.
And I think a bunch of that work will be done at the work session next week, or not next week, next month also. Next we do future agenda items, and I'm going to state for the November 7th work session, which will take place at Madison Elementary School. We have a Madison Elementary School presentation, then we have a new Tech High School update, and we have a discussion on the future of the strategic plan. So I think a lot of those discussions will take place at that meeting. Also, a reminder for everyone out there that November 6th, the day before our next meeting, is Election Day in the USA. This board has 3 seats open and 6 candidates running. The candidates are Beth Schlangen, Dr. Les Green, Natalie Ringsmuth, Peter Hammerlink, Zachary Dorholt, and Larry Hausch. Please go out and vote on November 6th. 3 of those candidates will be joining this board in January. Is there anything else that anyone would like to discuss? Seeing nothing, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.